Okay, hello everyone. Good morning. I'm Storm Chandler. It's like 06 dark 30, pilot for 6 years. If you're new, welcome back. If you're returning, that's even better. I'm clearly not awake yet. I still look like crap, and I know. Um, I'm in Tucson, Arizona. For those that are curious, uh, I have previous experience professionally in animal behavior and forensic pathology. So that's kind of my foundational life frame of reference. Um, I just decided to kind of put this together for last minute because those that know, I just share a little bit about what's going on with me and in my world and in my life, and try to get back in some sort of way in my old age, in order to help people kind of figure out what they're doing, where they're going, or to avoid maybe certain things. Which, as you know, I've been sharing about what kind of things to try to avoid if you can certain types of people. Um, so I've shared it. It's not something that's a secret. I've been in therapy for the last few months due to a relationship that I was involved in with, for a long time, with somebody that suffered from um, NPD, some form of NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. And so, in that, as you can imagine, um, traditional therapy is good. Talking about it's good. Sharing is good. Um, Reading about it's good. Talking to doctors has been very helpful because it's a hard thing to at first to kind of wrap your mind around and understand. Um, so here a couple of days ago, I had one of my counseling sessions, and she's a very nice woman, and she's had some experience with people in these situations, and we were discussing some things. I won't get into that particular topic because I'm not quite ready to disclose it yet. But in that conversation, she kind of stopped me for a second, and she was like, "So, who is the shadow person?" At first, I kind of thought she had meant, something else. Like there were thoughts in my mind that I couldn't prove, that I couldn't substantiate at that time. But cheating, infidelity, that there was something, not quite right, something was kind of amiss. But at that time, it was a thing of not being able to hardcore, pin it down and prove it. And so I let it slide. And that's one of those things that, again, to my later behest, learning later, it's one of those things that becomes kind of a side manipulation tactic in of itself because by the time you come along, by the time this person came along into my life, they've already been doing it for 20 years. So over a period of time, they just get better at it. It's not that they're not necessarily not doing it per se. It's just they get better at hiding it. They get better at stealthy, like Borg drones. You know, every year, every relationship, every person, they learn from their previous mistakes and they adapt. So, of course, on some level, they don't want to get caught. So it just becomes, a thread of lies, built into a lie, built into a lie, built into a lie, because they've learned what works and what doesn't. Excuse me. And so, anyway, going back to making my point, she was like, "So, who is your shadow person?" And again, I was kind of like, I have some suspicions, I have some, good hints, I have some good clues, but nothing that I can actually pin down or say of a particular, person. And she's like, well, stop and think about it. You know, it's probably somebody more than likely that you don't know. But, you know, she was saying usually in these narcissistic relationships, there's always a shadow person. There's always a shadow figure. There's always someone there, in the background. You may not necessarily be aware of it, or it looks innocent, or they've got a, perfectly logical explanation for it. But there's always usually someone floating around. And so, you know, it becomes in these long-term relationships kind of a narcissistic threesome, right? And it's by design. It's set up that way. I'm going to go through this and explain it to you kind of intellectually, kind of the way that she did, so that you are aware of these types of personality traits and the personality types, so that you can ask some questions to yourself and maybe have a conversation and, to be on guard and to watch. And here's what I mean, and I don't mean anything dirty about it, all right? It's just in that right there. It's a narcissistic threesome. Usually 9 times out of 10, whether you know it or not. And that doesn't mean necessarily there's implied any kind of physical wrongdoing or sexual wrongdoing, but usually on some sort of level, there's some sort of inappropriate sexual contact in some way, whether it be on their phone, whether it be by Skype, whether it be by video, whether it be by email, micro cheating. It's generally a very well employed tactic by them, because it's a way for them to get supply attention to someone else without actually doing anything wrong. It ends up being kind of a bullshit around about through, are you cheating and who are you with and what are you doing? And they can stand there and tell you in the face, in their mind, no, I'm not doing anything wrong. When they know good and well that there's someone on their phone or email, whatever, there's some sort of inappropriate contact, but in their mind, logically, because they haven't actually made any kind of contact with anybody, they don't see it as doing anything wrong. And she said more often than not, this is a side relationship that you're in that you don't even know that you're in. Usually what it is it starts off with, again, the sad story. They befriend someone. So-and-so sick, so-and-so died, someone close to them, lost their house, so on and so on. And so they set up that kind of false friendship dynamic. And then from there, at first, you see, we live in the tech age, so everyone's got Skype, everyone's got Facebook, everyone's got, Messenger, everyone's got, all the chat apps and stuff. So at first, it starts off, a fairly harmless seeming thing. And, even if you're a little aware of it, then, I admit in the beginning I was a little aware of it. There's nothing wrong with your boyfriend having friends. That's a perfectly reasonable thing. There's nothing wrong with your other half or your spouse or your partner or whatever having friends. It's cool. But that's not where that stops. That's not just a completely, strictly platonic thing. Because then they begin weaving. They begin weaving and way oversharing things that they have no business sharing. And that's how it starts. It usually starts off with, you're awesome, you're wonderful. They move to a new state. They can't believe how great you are. The place you can live is so awesome, right? The weather's great, the people are great, everything's great, everything about you is great. And, at first they start out bragging on you for attention because they're doing such a great job managing life. Everything is going so great for them, right? And usually the third person is like, yeah, well, that's cool. That's fun. That's cool. I'm happy for you. And of course, not really the third person, not really realizing what they've gotten themselves attached to in all this. Either knows very little about you or things that you wouldn't be comfortable not knowing them directly. I tend to be fairly private for the most part, weirdly. When it comes to certain elements in my household, that's just the way I'm wired. I'm from the South. There's just, there's a process involved in that, and I like to share on my terms. But in these situations, then after a while, there's that dark turn, that dark triad. And you hear a lot about that in psychologists and books and things about the dark triad. And this is where this steps in. So you're moving along in your relationship. And, just like anybody else, you go through little ups and little downs and whatever over that span of time. And then after about a year, you get fairly comfortable and settled into it, because you haven't completely processed yet what's going on. Because just like the third person, when you met them, you're thinking, they're traumatized, they've got an abusive backstory, they're the underdog usually in these situations. And you genuinely are coming from a place of empathy and sympathy, and that's rough, and that sucks, and that's not fair. And again, this isn't about taking from what made them then. It's that they just don't have the right to weaponize, and that's where it becomes a problem. So, because narcissists are about drama, whether it be physical drama, sexual drama, just pure drama for attention, what'll happen is that after a little while, because they can't self-regulate, then they start carrying some of their crap out on you. You were the new relationship. You were the new person, right? And you've been going along and giving and bending and trying to, help them out and get them situated and make them comfortable. And you're giving and you're trying really hard to, kind of win them over in a sense. Because most of us have been in some sort of psyche relationship before and we understand what that's like. And so we will try to work, on average, really hard to avoid that, right? You want someone to feel wanted and to be needed and all that good stuff. But with the narcissist, it's not the way it's perceived. Because over a period of time, once they see that they can get what they want out of you through blackmail, through emotional blackmail, through, being cloudy, and life sucks, and, all this kind of crap, you're bending, you're doing your best, you find yourself start doing emotional backflips, trying to make them happy. And it's not possible because they're not happy with themselves. They're not happy with their own identity. They're not happy with who they are in their head. So nothing that you do is going to change that. And so in that development, in that process, you start noticing things that are going awry. They're late. They're weirdly late all the time. And there's always some weird excuse. The GPS is off. GPS live. They stop to look at the moon. I mean, it becomes, like weird, but I guess semi-reasonable excuses. And at first you're like, all right, maybe there's something screwed up with the traffic system. Maybe there's something to what so and so said about, that GPS satellite being off, so on until you start rationalizing. But what they're doing is they're using that term, they're using that ability to communicate with someone else behind the back. And so after your first big couple argument or your first big couples fight, because again, it's bound to surface at some point, right? I mean, after a while of getting just to know someone, you get to know their schedule. You know what time they get to work. You know what time they get home. You know what time. You know how long the route is. All that good stuff. So that inconsistency of always being 10, 20, 30 minutes late. You start to ask questions. Most reasonable people do. Is there any particular reason that you're chronically a half hour late getting home every night, even though you only live a mile down the road? Because it's not that far. It's not complicated to get home. But that's because that's what they're doing. They're taking that 10, 20, 30 minutes of lag time, wherever it is in their day or night, to chit chat with somebody else. And during this process of you getting irritated and frustrated and noticing that, something's off, something's not quite right, they get mad at you. They get irritated with you. All of a sudden, you're not the fun one anymore. When you start noticing that something is logistically, realistically wrong and off, when you start questioning them, they get mad at you. Because now you're treading upon their space. Now they're treading upon their story and what they're doing. And so, in my situation, I don't know for a fact what their name is, so I'll go with Bob. All right, for all intents and purposes. Excuse me. So, this repeated cycle of them being late getting home, they're talking with Bob. Now it's gone from Bob is my friend on Facebook, on Skype, on Twitter, whatever, right? And they're like, okay, cool, that's fine, whatever. I wish I knew a little bit more about Bob, but we'll let that sit. To now they're sharing intimate details about your relationship, and you go from, oh, my partner's great, we're great, the sex is great, everything's fine, everything is well, to now they start dragging Bob into, well, you won't believe what Storm was asking me about last night. He was on my ass as soon as I got through the door. I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything. He is so controlling because your ass has been late getting home for 4 nights in a row when you only work a mile down the road. And like I said, it's not that hard to get home. You know what I mean? There's no reason for you to live that close to home. So, of course, I ask questions. I'm not stupid. But see, that's what they don't tell Bob. Because Bob may or may not know about it. Usually in these situations, there's some inkling, right, of you. But, it depends on the narcissist. Because I'm fairly public on Facebook and whatnot, I'm fairly sure Bob knows it. Because that's how these things work. Narcissists very rarely have genuine friends because their bullshit pushes people away. And it doesn't take people long to figure out what they're about. And, no, thank you. I don't think that, we want to be friends kind of thing. You seem to have issues, right? So they have these online friends or telephone friends or Twitter friends. friends or Facebook friends. It's people that don't actually know them from a distance or from a reasonable distance because it's a way to be able to play their hand. And so now in the having arguments and where have you been and who are you talking to and what's going on, you need to talk to me and this is not making sense. You're now the problem. You're the problem for asking because shit's not adding up. That's how that works. That's their thinking. And when you start asking questions, then you become the bad guy. And then they start telling Bob what an asshole you are. And then usually the sexual component in there is they start sending sexual videos, sexual pictures with their shirts off, they're flexing, they're posing, they're sending nudes. You can use your imagination from there where that goes. And Bob, again, at this point, not really realizing what he's getting into, thinks he's getting gold. He thinks now you're the asshole that's mistreating your boyfriend or significant other, whatever. You're not there for them. You're not being sympathetic to them. You're not meeting their needs. You're just not what, they thought you wanted. They wanted. When it's not the case. Because then now it becomes manipulating in the dark. There's these horrible sad stories about how awful you are to a stranger that you don't know. And then, of course, Bob is sympathetic to that. I'll stop and think about that for a second. It makes sense to me. It's not hard to figure out. If you have your significant other going on about how mean you are to them and you're not happy anymore and so-and-so's being a jerk and so-and-so's asking me about my phone and he's always harassing me about where I'm going and what I'm doing and when I'm going to be back and who I'm talking to, which again are fairly reasonable questions. Again, Bob not knowing what he's getting involved with is going to feel empathy, sympathy for him. And it's going to be, there. Who are you? Oh, that's so horrible. Then they start planning ideas, again, not realizing what they're getting into. Maybe you could do better. Maybe you could do better. Maybe you should leave. Maybe you should just leave the relationship. Maybe you should just move on. Maybe you could come stay with me. Right? They've supplied, they've attention. They're going with their sad victim story. They're sending pictures. They're sharing intimate details. And you don't realize that you are in a relationship with a third person that you probably have never even met and don't even know. That's sharing private things about you. They're probably twisted so that you now look like the evil asshole. It's psychology. It's twisted psychology. They have this third person in your life that you're not even completely aware of that's there, either across town or in another state, that's in your life, that's shadow living your life, which is creepy as all fuck, but this is usually a lot of the times how they operate. And then, from there it usually descends. And it descends fairly quickly because they know that you are onto the idea that something's not right. that they're on their phone all the time. They won't leave their phone alone. They have their phone key coded. You start asking to look at it. You start asking for their emails. You start asking for their text messages. You end up having some sort of a showdown about, I need to see what's going on for myself, or you need to leave. Because if it's gotten to the point where I don't trust you anymore, then you need to go. Then, because it's serves them, they cave in. But it doesn't stop there. Because even if they relent, then they know that you're going to ask to look to see, and so all they do is get better at hiding it. They come up with fake names. They make 3 or 4 different email accounts. In mine, I discovered that he had 5 different fake names and 5 different fake email accounts. 5 different names. He uses 5 different names in his daily dealings with people. Lord knows how many people during that course of time that he was chit-chatting with on the internet all behind my back. There's always someone there with these people because they know the day of burning the bridge is coming. But you're not stupid. You're going to figure it out. And odds are when you do, you're going to be pissed. I know I was. And when you finally have that breaking moment where you go, you're just not getting it. You're not going to change. No amount of therapy, no amount of talking, no amount of bargaining or pleading or threatening or crying or screaming or anything is really going to get it to resonate, to get it. Because they're not in that headspace to really self-reflect and change yet. They've got that third person in the room. So Bob, hearing all this awful stuff about you from their point of view, right, that they've been told, has been grooming them for months, for years, behind your back, because they're only getting one side of the story about what assholes you are, and they think they're getting the new improved version of what they've been eyeballing all this time because of dirty pictures and dirty videos and dirty chats and do whatever. And you're so hot, you're so wonderful, and it's so awesome, right? That by that time they're emotionally invested. Bob is emotionally invested in your narcissistic boyfriend or your narcissistic girlfriend. They don't realize, again, the whole cycle repeats. The whole cycle repeats. And then there's the discard. There's the discard where either you're a narcissist, up and disappears and leaves, or there's what they call the reverse discard, where they use mind games and psychology into tricking you. Let me say that again because I realize it sounds bizarre. Where they use the reverse discard, mind games and psychology, because they know you, they know what buttons to push, to trick you into throwing them out. They'll do something on purpose that they know will set you off to get you to throw them out so they can work that victim story. So they can go back to Bob and say, see, I told you. You're a horrible, mean person. Storm is a horrible, mean person. Threw me out in the dark of night with nothing. I had nowhere to go and didn't know what I was going to do. Woe's me, woe's me. And of course, Bob sitting in excuse me, Texas or Colorado or Connecticut or wherever or across town because your narcissistic spouse, your narcissistic boyfriend, girlfriend has been setting it up for months to years behind your back, waiting for this day to come. And so since they don't know how to be alone, they've set up the emergency place to go. and the cycle starts all over again with somebody new. And you don't realize it until you've either gone to therapy, or you talk to a doctor, or you start asking yourself really deep questions and reading and trying to understand what's going on. The whole cycle repeats again with somebody else until somebody else gets hurt. And they'll do it again and again and again. And the cycle will continue until the looks go, they go broke, they mentally or emotionally snap finally under their own self-inflicted misery and pressure. They end up in the psych wards. Or, and it's not funny, and I say it with the utmost of sincerity, they push themselves to the emotional breaking point where they start considering really awful things like self-harm, and, they may or may not, need to be housed professionally for a while for their own safety because they're all emotionally whacked out. They haven't processed and dealt with their trauma and their issues, and this is the way that they do it. This is their life. This is how they live. And that's why generally, by and large, most doctors, most therapists say these people do not change until they choose to. And until they choose to, it continues to be a lifelong repeating cycle where they go through life hurting people emotionally, sexually, mentally, verbally. It continues over and over and over and over until they finally get to a point in life that they choose to change. And until they choose to change, it's like dealing with an addict. They are not going to get it. And so, for me, myself, and reflection and retrospect, it's really weird to look back and realize that somewhere along the way, during the course of my last relationship, there was a shadow person. I was involved in a relationship with a third person I never saw, I never met, I never knew. At least I don't think so. These situations are tricky. It can be your next door neighbor, it can be your best friend on Facebook, it can be someone that you know on the net, it can be an acquaintance. All going on behind your back for Lord knows how long because they're not emotionally messed up. That's the only way that they know how to cope and deal. It's the only way that they know how to get attention and to regulate and to get their needs and wants fulfilled in the moment. And then when they get bored with you or they become afraid that you're going to figure it out, they're gone and they've already moved on to the next one. It's a bizarre thing. It's a weird thing to kind of stop and think about, but that's how, on average, most narcissists are. There's a little bitty something inside of them that's just broken, and that's the only way that they know to deal. And, so like I said, it's been bizarre for me to think of it in that context. And, I hashed it out with my therapist, and, my doctor for my particular situation. And again, everyone in the situation is different. There are several different types of narcissists. Each one's going to be a little bit different, or each one's going to be mixes. There's mixes of different types of narcissism too. They can overlap, they can intermingle. So it can be really hard to figure out what's going on and what type that you might be dealing with. But for me, in my situation, I've, 90% figured it out, and, it all makes perfect sense now. It's not a pleasant thing to go through, but I understand better now, and I understand better what to look for now. So, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of wrap that up here because it's like almost 7 in the morning. But I thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. Last day or two since my last therapy session, and but I wanted to share a little bit of that. Because it had been, in the back of my mind, it's a weird thing to realize that somewhere along the way, it wasn't just you and them. In these situations, there's usually somebody else who's tagging along and you don't know it. So, if you're involved with someone and they seem to have some issues and some problems that follow that kind of general tag of in some way being long-term, uh, textbook narcissistic in some way, look around you. Ask questions. See who's there. See who's around. I'm not talking about being paranoid. I'm not talking about, making false accusations and stuff against people and disturbing folks unnecessarily. But just look and ask yourself. Ask some questions. Who was your last relationship? What was their name? Where did they live? What was that backstory? How long did the relationship last? Who was your friends on Facebook? I don't see anything wrong with asking questions like that. Ask some deep digging. Because with these narcissistic personalities, there's a lot there that you might not know. I'm all for honesty and disclosure, but these people, you have to push the envelope a little bit. Because if you don't, they're upset. And they'll go on behind your back for Lord knows how long. Until they either get tired of you or you get tired of them. So, with that, I'm going to leave it up there and finish waking that. But I hope that gave you some sort of an insight. I hope you provided you with a little bit of maybe understanding. If not for anything else, maybe a little bit of understanding of what I went through. And then that you can find that helpful in some sort of way and maybe help somebody else. So, but I'm going to go ahead and stop here. And have a good day and be careful. And if you have any questions, as best I can from my perspective, I'll be happy to answer. So take care. Peace.